All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming out this afternoon. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Frank Doyle. I'm the provost here at Brown. And it's a pleasure to join you this afternoon for this evening's event in our Thinking Out Loud Presidential Colloquium series. I want to thank Chris Rose in the front row here, professor of engineering, for his leadership, his stewardship, his creativity around this series through its 10-year history, including, of course, today's event as well. So the president, together with Chris, had the idea to organize this series. And what they wanted to do differently was think about not just the challenging questions that scholars and researchers are working on, but to make it more accessible by getting behind the scenes and understanding the thought process that drove the work that leads to the interesting scholarship. So not just sharing findings, but really sharing thinking that goes behind that. So this afternoon, we'll engage on a topic that goes well beyond just data and policy to something more fundamental, and that is trust. So in public health, and indeed, sorry, Ashish, you don't have a monopoly here, many disciplines, I would say, we talk about impact, about reaching communities, about driving change. And this is really a fundamental concept. But this afternoon reminds us that how we engage matters just as much as what we know and how we go about doing that. So we're delighted to hear from our own Professor Erica Walker, a member of the School of Public Health, whose work as an environmental health scientist and community advocate really challenges all of us to rethink the role of research in people's everyday lives. Her insights, grounded in experience, empathy, and a deep respect for communities, will no doubt spark meaningful reflection for all of us, I hope. The conversation ahead, entitled Public Health, Have We Lost Our Way?, invites us to reflect on the role of academic institutions in people's lives and the responsibility, indeed, that we bear to show up, listen carefully, and earn the trust of those we aim to serve. So these questions are especially important at a place like Brown, where our research mission is deeply connected to our commitment to public good. So thank you for being here this afternoon. I will now turn things over to Professor Chris Rose for the formal introduction of our speaker. Chris.
Okay, so first off, I always ask this for Thinking Out Louds. This is our 22nd Thinking Out Loud for the past over the 10 years. And I always ask the same question. How many recidivists do we have here? How many have been to, I saw Jim Vallis in there, and I'm looking at you and you look familiar. Have you been at a Thinking Out Loud? Is that Kim? Never mind. I'm just surprised. In any case, so as Frank said, this series is about something different. And we have two new things here for this particular one. The first is that this is the very first time that a Brown professor has given a Thinking Out Loud talk. Okay? So that kind of tells you something right there. Obviously, Erica's brilliant. There's a second thing that's also important, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. And I'm going to try to be quick. So Erica is an interesting sort of individual. What she's done is she's looking to help the most vulnerable among us when it comes to environmental insults, is the bottom line. So, that's a laudable sort of thing. And a lot of people do air, people do water, but she sees things a little bit differently. And it's really rare. She has this eerie way of seeing through to the truth of things and then acting on it somehow. Now that gets to the second thing. If you've been here, and Jim knows this, our speakers, I've always said for each and every one, they're just a little bit crazy. Okay? That's and to do good research, you gotta be a little bit crazy. But what's different about Erica, she's also crazy, but here's what I think happened. I think that ability to see through to the core of a problem and to see the misery that gets inflicted on people drove her a little crazy. But then she took that crazy and applied it to ways that will actually end up helping people. So when I first heard her speak, I and others first heard her speak, we came away thinking, what have we been doing with our lives? So I'm hoping that you will enjoy this talk as much as we've enjoyed Erica's mind in our STEM Jazz Thinking Out Loud community. So with that, Erica, please.
None of that was true. Anyway, I'm so excited to be here. It's nice to see familiar faces and new faces. I hope I get to know more about some of you that I don't know, like later. But I want to just say that this is a conversation that's based on my life's journey. I'm not telling you that I think the way that I think is the right way. These are just kind of lessons I've learned along the way. So, don't feel free to disagree with me. But this is what... So this is kind of like my story. So don't think of me as preaching to you, but just kind of sharing my thoughts about the work that I do. So more of self-reflections. And the key word here is self. So before I start, I always like to give my positionality statement, not in the politically correct kind of way, but to kind of tell you when you see my throat swell up a little bit throughout the presentation, I want you to know that I grew up in a very small town in Mississippi. You can look at this Google map and it looks very nice. Like, oh, look, a small town, things that we all see in small towns, like a Dollar General or a Family Dollar or whatever. But this town is actually divided by a freight rail line. So one half of the town is white people. The other half of the town is black people. Of course, I lived on the black part of town where you see that body of water. Looks like a nice pond, but it's actually an open sewer lagoon. And that creek, we had a trailer right here at the edge of this creek. That creek used to flood all the time, and we used to get all kinds of lung diseases and things like that. So I was always primed to kind of think about the environment, even though when you grow up in an environment like this, you tend to want to run away from it. But we were a poor family. When we saw academics come to our communities to fill out surveys, we donated our bodies and our time to get money. And my dad and many of my family members were participants in the Jackson Heart Study. So I'm going to come back and talk about this in a little more detail. But, I was very used to people coming into our community kind of examining us with the microscope, but never really knowing what happened after they interviewed us, after they surveyed us, if they took our blood samples. And a part of that kind of today fills me with purpose, like kind of undo some of the things that I felt like my family and many people in my community went through. So now that I've told you all that, I just want to get some things off my chest. So some days I want to burn it all down. When I talk about public health, when I talk about being in public health, I'm one of those people that, some days I'm like, F it. I hate this place. I hate this discipline. I feel like sometimes it's everything wrong with society. And I also kind of understand why people are having these negative feelings about academia. But then I'm also in academia. I'm also in public health. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to burn it down because I want to continue another day to do the work. But I want to share some of the reasons why I want to burn it down. Like, why was the Jackson Heart Study in my community poking and prodding us, but we don't have really much to show for it. So if you see me with tears well up in my eyes, you'll know that there's a part of me that's filling with rage, and there's a part of me with hope as well. So I'm also a former artist. So whenever I'm at a podium and I'm talking about this kind of stuff, it's like really weird to me. I don't feel like I was primed to be an academic, but here I am. But I'm a fellow artist. I mean, I'm still an artist, but I do ceramics, I do bookbinding, I make furniture. And I had a chance encounter with some upstairs neighbors one day who had moved in. My studio was my apartment, was my living space, my office space, everything. And a family with 2 small kids moved in above me. And they used to run across their floor, which is my ceiling, for like 24 hours a day. And that really filled me with rage, in the sense that I tried to do everything I could to get them evicted, collecting information, etc. My friends saw that I was becoming a completely different person. And they were like, hey, Erica, I think you need to take a chill pill, but I really think you would like this thing called public health. Never heard of it. Last thing on my mind. But I want to talk about my selfish science era. So I sold off all of my equipment, decided I was going to take a stab at being a public health practitioner, enrolled in school, and did the academic thing. But my reasons for getting into academia was because I really wanted to kind of address this issue with noise in communities and how it impacted their health. So I did the academic thing, did a lot of stuff around noise, but generally really hated it. I just kind of felt like, okay, after I did this noise measurements and noise maps, what was the purpose of it? I didn't really feel like it led to anything that felt to me like it was meaningful. But at the same time, when I was doing my dissertation work, I was also out in the community talking to people, asking them about their noise exposures, how it made them feel, were they like me, where was it loud, etc. I created a really simple Google Forms survey. When I look at the survey, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, but I did it. And through the process, met a lot of really interesting people with really varied experiences and things I wasn't thinking about. Here I was thinking I was going to say road traffic noise impacted people's cardiovascular health, and that's all I was going to study. But then listening to all these different families across, I was in Massachusetts at the time, getting all these different perspectives like noise sensitivity, something I wasn't really thinking about, and something that's not captured in your typical decibel when you take a sound level meter and measure it in the community, or people who was talking about noises that they heard and noises that they felt. I don't know, it didn't seem like my noise sensor was measuring things that people felt. I thought that was also interesting. And taking all of that data, both the hardcore data when I was out in the community measuring sound and some of the stuff that I picked up on by talking to people, was able to do a lot more than I thought I could do, right? At first, I thought I was just going to write a series of papers where I was looking at noise exposures and community health, but because I had that experience with talking with people, was able to do lots of different metrics and stretch my mind in ways I didn't think. Now, all of these things are probably poor examples of, good public health policy and practices, but they were things that I did at the time. And it kind of made me thinking that academia doesn't have to be like this, and I don't have to be a traditional academic researcher. So all of that was really interesting. We did smartphone apps, you name it. I really enjoyed that part about talking to communities. So I knew that when I graduated with my PhD, I knew that it was going to be very important for me to go out and make sure I kept the community centered in my work. So after my selfish science era, I kind of went through my selfless science era, where I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to give up all of my worldly desires to become a famous academic. And I'm going to just actually spend my time talking to people in the community. So give of myself to others. I know it sounds kind of eye-rolly, but that's what I was thinking at the time. So in the process of kind of moving from traditional publish or perish academia to listening to community members, I kind of opened up myself to listening to what people had to say. What were the issues? I'm not going to say that it's road traffic noise exposure that's harming people. I'm going to find out what's going on. So in the process, worked with a lot of communities on things like road traffic noise from hospitals, noise from ambulance sirens, noise from gentrification, noise from concerts, noise from tourism, you name it. I worked with it and really, really, really learned so much about community noise exposure. But at the same time that I started doing all that, COVID happened. And during COVID, I was also on the job market. And so I kind of knew that I needed to get a faculty position. And I knew it was going to be a little hard sell to be like, hey, I'm coming into academia and I just want to talk to people in the community. I knew that wasn't going to work either. But COVID opened up my eyes to an example that I'm going to share with you now. But when I kind of got into the tenure track life, I sort of realized that I'm going to have to shed parts of me that I think are important to kind of fit into this mold, right? I'm going to have to adapt to that publish or perish life. I'm going to have to do that grant writing. I'm going to have to do all of that. So I kind of decided to be led by this. So I kind of go from hating academia, really loving this community experience, to realizing that if I want to eat tomorrow, if I want to pay my bills, I'm probably going to have to become a traditional academic again. And of course, because I had done a lot of work in noise exposure, every research professor's dream is to get that call from the New York Times and say that, hey, we're interested in something that you've been doing. So I got a phone call from a reporter from the New York Times, and she was like, Erica, it's so quiet where I am. How is it in your community? And I opened my door and went outside. I'm like, girl, it's really quiet around here. And, so I was thinking like, yeah, COVID is really quiet. And we both talked for hours about how quiet it was. And she wanted to write an article about this unprecedented quiet during COVID. But I thought I was going to go into this kind of self-centered science. Like I'm going to just go into into, this prompt by the New York Times. Hey, I want that kind of life. I want that, Nobel Prize kind of life. But at the same time, I realized I had developed tools in my dissertation area where I knew I could kind of get a sense of what was happening on the ground. And so I was kind of torn. Do I kind of go down this prompt of the New York Times reporter, or do I actually stay true to the tools that I had developed? Of course, I'm going to stay true to the tools that I had developed. So I opened up my smartphone app, Noise Score, and I realized that it wasn't quiet everywhere in Massachusetts and also other parts of the world. I saw all these little pockets of red in the noise maps. And then I also, in between me being a starving artist and where I am now, I taught high school for many years. A student who had been following me randomly emailed me on Facebook, and she was like, hey, Erica, I live in Dorchester and it is so loud here. Can you just come and figure out what's going on? So I remember I got on my bike and drove through Brookline, down through Boston and around to Dorchester. And it was immediately I was hit with this sound. I always say it sounded like I was in some war-torn country, just incessant firework activity. And so in the process, I was like, okay, let's get into action. Let's see what's going on here. Is it the New York Times reporter right? Or is it my ears that are right? So myself, I don't know if Nina's here, but Nina's a doctoral student here at Brown. At the time, she was working with me as a research assistant. And we put up a bunch of sensors across Boston to kind of see what was going on. And we looked at certain communities and also wanted people to use the app to kind of figure out where were people complaining, what was going on. So we put some strategic locations in some areas where we noted where there was lots of firework activity, in areas where there wasn't firework activity, and in areas where there was reportings of firework activity, but people weren't engaging in the app. And so that was up in the East Boston area. There's some very interesting stories about why people weren't engaging in the app, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So I made an infographic and put it on Twitter. And one of the city council women, her name is Julia Mee, I think she's here. She was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Can we, I've been getting a lot of complaints in my neighborhood about firework noise. Can we convene a task force? And I was like, yeah, I have data and I'm really curious to hear more. So we all got together online. Again, this was during COVID. And we had this really cool fireworks task force where I was able to understand things about the tools that I had created. So for example, that smartphone app, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable using that smartphone app, especially people that live in East Boston, which is it's a community with lots of undocumented immigrants who don't feel safe with me calling, hey, download this citizen science app that tracks noise exposure in your community. So they really didn't feel comfortable interacting with that. And as a result of that, they didn't really feel comfortable participating. So one of the people that was a part of the task force, pulled me to the side and told me that. And I really appreciated that. And in the process, we were able to kind of get down to the bottom of what was happening in these neighborhoods. We were able to, with the data collected and data that we analyzed from the city of Boston, really narrow in on those neighborhoods in Boston that were impacted by firework activity. So much so we were able to pretty much identify areas of Boston where people were, igniting fireworks, where there were property that was catching on fire, to where people were actually dropping pallets of fireworks into the community to pop off. This was that's another story for another day. The conspiracy theory in me was like, well, why in this period of unprecedented silence, there was firework activity that was happening not only in Boston, it ended up being a nationwide thing, and poor communities across the country during this year of COVID, there was just this random spurt of firework activity. But in the process of that, I was able to write, the city of Boston entrusted me to write a fireworks safety guide on their website. I felt like the biggest imposter, but I did it. They asked me to do it and I did it. And I found that experience was really great, but it also showed me a few things. It showed me the importance of the work that I was doing. I think studying environmental noise and its impacts on human health is important. But it also told me that I want to contribute to environmental noise, but I don't want to contribute to what I call academic noise. And I think that New York Times reporter's prompt, as great as it felt, to be recognized by such a famous newspaper, was going to lead me down a path that I would not have been able to take part in this fireworks task force or even known that there was this firework activity happening in Black and brown communities across the United States. So I feel like through that experience, it made me realize that I always want to be in a situation where I can focus on the right questions in the right place at the right time. And for me, I feel like that is something that we as public health practitioners should be doing. So, you know, I'm going to talk about this more in a little bit. During COVID, the COVID-ish era, I would say, you know, rightfully, we were very concerned about keeping people safe. But at the same time, we were not kind of multitasking here. We were ignoring some equally important issues that were happening. And in the process of not showing up for those communities too, our trust was even more severely damaged. So during that time of COVID, I also began to think about home as well. So I was like, well, you know, what other blind spots have I had? What's going on at home? Should I be doing research at home? Like that whole experience with the city of Boston made me feel a little guilty. I'm like, I'm doing all of this stuff for a city that I kind of live in because, you know, I went to school here and I just was too lazy to move somewhere else. But what's happening in my hometown? Why can't I be directing the resources I have to my community? And I know my community needed a lot of help as a person who came from that place. But this is what confronted me when I went to Jackson. Now, mind you, when I went to Mississippi, I was going as a noise researcher. I was going to tell them, hey, we're going to study noise. And of course, they quickly got me together. And, you know, what confronted me when I was in Jackson was a water crisis, right? A water crisis where people weren't getting clean, fresh water. There was also lots of issues around illegal dumping. There was also lots of issues about our governor opening up the state to lots of industrial expansion. And when I had a series of community meetings, kind of figuring out what do y'all want me to do? I really want to do noise. Please say it's noise. Please say it's noise. I realized that noise was actually number 12. So I had a choice to make here. And that choice was, do I do noise pollution when it was number 12 on the list? Or do I do something like data infrastructure or water quality? So I'm not a water quality expert. I think, Craig, you know a lot more than me when it comes to water quality. But at the same time, I knew that that's what I had to do. So in that case, we got in formation. You know, what do they call it? The Power Rangers? I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the Power Rangers, but we got together to work on the most important issue, which was, well, data infrastructure, but water quality. And then that led me to asking questions about the Jackson Heart Study. And I don't know if you guys know about the Jackson Heart Study. I'm going to talk about it now. I'm going to get it off my chest. But it's the longest running study of cardiovascular disease in African Americans probably ever. And we're talking about tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of funding in the study that started in 1997. And one of the things I didn't know until a couple of days ago when I wanted to do my fact checking for my lecture is that I didn't realize that they were investigating genetic and environmental factors. That struck me. I just sort of assumed that they weren't, because I never heard anything about environmental work through this study. But I was like, wow, they're studying environmental factors too. But where did all of that money go? Because in the meantime, we've had a water crisis, a trash crisis. We've had this infiltration of polluting industry. So like, what is this? And what are they doing? And what are we doing with the money that we get from these grants? What are we leaving behind? And so I think that I've talked to you about selfish science, self-centered science, suggestion box science. I've talked to you about all kinds of science. But I think that we need to be storm chasers as researchers. We need to direct our resources and our energies and our strategies and our time to places that need help the most. So we have to be what I call backyard scientists. We have to care about the problems that happen right outside of our window. We have to be leave it on the field scientists, meaning that we're not going to leave here until we make sure that everybody in this community is better off because of something that we've done. I know that sounds idealistic, but we need to be problem-solving scientists and we need to be infrastructure scientists. We need to leave things behind that people can use to further develop. Otherwise, we're wasting time and we're wasting money. So I want to talk to you about what problem solving and infrastructure science means to me. So it means we need to regroup. It means that I need to be in my office in Providence, Rhode Island, but I also need to be in my office in Jackson, Mississippi. So I say that like I could just snap a finger and that happens. But I had to beg people I knew I needed to set up shop in my hometown. I know I needed to be present, first of all. So I needed to be there. I also know that I needed to tackle those issues that were most important. Eventually we'll get to number 12, noise pollution, but I know that I needed to address the issues that were on the ground. So water is your issue? Let's test tap water. So we started to test tap water, and we erected, with the help of lots of local high school students, many of whom were also impacted by the water crisis, to test water of people in the community. So we had mobile tap water testing labs. We ran around and did demonstrations in the community to kind of show them, hey, this is what your boil water notice is telling you to do. This is what you should be concerned about. This is what you should not be concerned about. Maybe you should get a lead test before you boil water, all kinds of things. We gave out tap water testing reports, and we synthesized all of the data on our website. So you could look at the water quality by zip code, by city, and you could also get your own personal results, so by household as well. And then, one of the things that people was explained to me was like, okay, we get these boil water notices. We don't understand anything that's in these boil water notices. So I found that a lot of people really just kind of needed to understand where water came from, how it got to your tap. So we created activity books where we could share with children and adults the water's process from the ground to literally the tap water, to their tap. And for them to understand things in terms like pH, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, all of these things that they saw in these boil water notices. It just basically tell people like your water's bad, boil it before you drink it, before you take a bath, before you take medication, anything. But we wanted to make sure that we built a literacy infrastructure so people are not just doing something because they're going to get $50 or a chance to enter a raffle, but they understand the importance of this and how it impacts the health of themselves and their community. We also built a data infrastructure. So I don't think this data exists anymore, but we looked at vulnerability in communities. We looked at all the boil water notices per, census block group. And we also just looked at where areas in Jackson that were most susceptible to these boil water issues, these water issues. And we gave this data to the city. Now, once I give it to the city, it's out of my hands. They do whatever they want to with it, but we built that infrastructure. And then we also built infrastructure. So I was very interested in understanding how boil water notices impacted school attendance, right? So I grew up in Jackson. We never got boil water notices, but if you look at a boil water notice, it's like boil your water before you literally eat, drink, take a bath, take your medication. And so it feels to me like it would be so prohibitive when you wanted to get your kids ready in the morning. If your water is something that you have to boil to just do basics to get kids into the classroom, I don't think people are going to they're going to come to class during these boil water notices. So that was a hunch. It was kind of anecdotally confirmed by talking to people in the Jackson Public School District. Like, we saw a huge drop in attendance during this water crisis. But when I went to go try to do this analysis, there were no zoning maps. Like, there's no school zoning maps. I called Jackson Public School District and I was like, hey, can I have y'all's school zoning shapefile? And they just I just heard this laugh through the phone. They're like, that doesn't exist. But we have all of these hard copies of PDFs that we can give you and go make what you want with it. And so I took them. I just remember being in my hotel room. It took me 2 weeks, but we built zoning maps for the school district in Jackson. And we were able to do the analysis, which we did. And we found that the boil water alerts definitely impacted school attendance. And in some schools, up to 10%. Can you imagine? I don't know about you, but when I missed one day of calculus, I was done for the semester. So I can't imagine missing multiple days of school because of something outside of your control. So after kind of understanding, yes?
We'll talk a little bit about the demographics, maybe?
Yeah, of Jackson.
In this particular.
Yeah, so Jackson is probably now close to 90% Black. So I think when I did this analysis, it was probably 85% Black. Poor, it's Black, poor, blighted city.
Any differential demographically?
Of the school attendance, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. but I will look in and ask you and answer your question. So we looked at this, and one of the things that was so bothersome to me is one of the schools that I went to in elementary was one of the ones that was most impacted. For me, that was so weird. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about my struggle with survivor's guilt, but I wanted to dive deeper. I wanted to go back to my middle school and be like, what's going on here? Like, and talk to students here. So thanks to IBIS and the Catalyst Award, we were able to kind of dive deeper into this problem. So it's one thing to be like, oh my goodness, boil water notices impacted school attendance. But for me, that wasn't enough. I really wanted to understand that. So, Jackson had its water crisis. The water system was taken over by a third-party manager, and the water got better, right? But people still weren't drinking the water. Lots of community organizations reached out to me and was like, hey, we're seeing an uptick in dehydration cases. A lot of the students that went to the school that we went into are older. They are guardians to their grandkids. And so like the grandparents were not taking their medication because they were scared of drinking the water. They were not letting their children drink the water. So kids were not coming to school. They were still dehydrated and no one trusted the water. So we wanted to do an intervention in the school to see like, well, the water is better. Like we've tested it. The water's better. Why are you still not drinking it? And the students, sharing their feelings about that. So with this intervention, we gave out a survey. We asked them about their trust issues with the water. And we had each one of the students go home, collect a sample of their water, and we tested it in their science classes. So they learned about water. They tested it for everything ranging from lead in the water to from pH to lead in the water. They created reports. They sent them home to their parents. And then we asked the parents, hey, like after you heard from your kids that this water was safe, do you think it's safe to drink this tap water? And then we found that by having their kids drink that to test their own water, they were able to trust the water. And for me, that was also very centering because as a researcher, with our Brown pedigree and our fancy degrees, you think that when you walk into a community, the seas are supposed to part and we're the ones that are the most trusted resources. But this experience set me on my ass. And it set me on my ass because I realized in that moment that I wasn't the expert. I wasn't the one that was going to convince the parents to drink the water. It was their own children. And that, I think, is one of the other issues that we need to think about is who's the most trusted messenger? And if the most trusted messenger isn't you, step to the side and empower the person that is the most trusted messenger. I spent way too much time on that. But this whole experience also made me deal with my old ghosts. So when I showed you my pictures of me being young and living in Mississippi, of course, when I had the chance to leave, I left and I ran and I didn't come back. And for a long time, I was very embarrassed about where I came from. I came from poverty. I was that trailer park kid. I was that kid that didn't have running water. So, when I came back and kind of confronted not only my old ghosts, but the old ghosts in the school, I was filled with survivor's guilt, right? I think that, if I went to the school systems in Jackson that existed today, would I be here today talking to you? I think the answer is no. But, I was able to, in this process, not only, I think, do some interesting work, but also confront some of my insecurities as well. So infrastructure science looks like going deeper. It looks like taking your hypotheses and running with it and not being afraid of where you end up. So in addition to this being a therapy session for myself, some interesting things also happened. So when we were in this middle school and when we were working with middle school students across Jackson, we also found that there was a hygiene issue. And so that was something that we reached out to IBIS again for some money. Like, hey, can we get some hygiene kits for students? And what did you say, Dr. Cobb? They said yes. And we had a student here at Brown who's graduating very soon. She was moved by that. And she was like, oh, wow, I want to create an activity book that helps girls understand the menstrual cycle part of their lives. And she was able to pass these books out and the menstrual kits, thanks to IBIS, out to people in the school. So what went from me wanting to come to Mississippi to be a noise researcher ended up me coming to Mississippi to be a water researcher, and also having having students here at Brown partake in things like menstrual health. So that wasn't on my vision board, but it was something that happened. And I'm glad that it happened. And I'm glad that I took that process, because I felt like I would have missed out on a lot. And in addition to that, we were able to understand, we were just kind of checking off the list of things that we felt like we need to address. I'm not saying that these things are complete. These are works in progress. I'm not saying, okay, water quality done, moving on. But we also are working with illegal dumping. That's the next big issue in Jackson, Mississippi. We had created an illegal dumping site reporting tool for people to report illegal dumping sites. In Jackson, I want you guys to guess how many illegal dumping sites that have been reported in the city of Jackson, which is about the size of Providence, Rhode Island. Providence and Jackson are very similar. I want you to guess how many illegal dumping sites did residents complain about? A dozen? 1,000?
I was going to guess 100.
Yeah, about 150. And we're not talking about illegal dumping sites like with little piles of trash on the side of the road. This is where we're talking about whole streets. So we created a reporting tool where people would report their illegal dumping sites, and we would go out and catalog them. And we cataloged them for lots of things, including soil and surface water pollution. A lot of these illegal dumping sites had tires filled with water. They had mattresses and trash. Just all kinds of trash. I can't even imagine it. But also doing surface and soil water pollution. So I came to Jackson as a noise researcher. We did water. We did menstrual health. And now we're looking at soil and surface water pollution around illegal dumping sites. And another student who's going to be graduating in a couple of days, she created an illegal dumping site database where she took all of the data that we were collecting on the ground and synthesized it into a really nice portal that houses all of the information that we've collected to date on illegal dumping sites in Jackson, including pictures. Name it and shame it, our motto is. And that has really served to help local organizations kind of organize to clean these sites up. And in addition to that, the city was like, hey, can you do all of our illegal dumping stuff? Can you do it? So the city has also entrusted us with kind of keeping up with their illegal dumping site complaints. And then we were also able to kind of understand the importance of working with communities as they were dealing with the infestation, I guess is the right word to say, of industry into their communities. We're talking about rural communities that are now playing host to industrial plants that are the size of football fields. We're talking about 10 football fields worth of data centers, or a huge wood pellet plant that pollutes, it's literally surrounding the community. Or we're talking about tire manufacturing plants, or we're talking about all kinds of things. And so in the process of that, we have set up a series of air and noise pollution monitors across the state of Mississippi and Alabama that's collecting all kinds of real-time data. And we're keeping tabs on the air quality in Mississippi. And we also have a cohort study where we are in each one of these communities that we are measuring air pollutants in. We're also recruiting children starting at the age of 12 to kind of understand what's happening to their health. There's something that happens in Jackson. The children are kind of healthy, but they grow up to be really unhealthy adults, is what we have seen through evidence in the Jackson Heart Study. And, we work a lot with community colleges in Mississippi. I think that community colleges are an underinvested but critically important resource, especially in states like Mississippi. They have been transformative in helping us to do all of the work that we're doing. And again, I'm all about environmental literacy. Another student, she's not graduating this year. She better stay around because she needs to finish this project. But just want to kind of brag a little bit on another student, Jacqueline Larson, who was she comes from a border town in Arizona. And we were talking, I've never been to her town, but we were just kind of comparing similarities between my town and her town in Arizona. And, she was really touched by environmental health literacy, and she wanted to create a program that looked at environmental health literacy. So this summer, actually on June the 9th, I'm just going to go back a little. Oh, anyway, June the 9th, we're launching the Environmental Explorer School. It's a free online school for middle school students. They can learn all about environmental health. But one of the things I think is really powerful to me, and I asked her if I could put her email on blast, and she said yes, by all means. But one of the things I like about this work is that I get to wake up to emails like this. I get to wake up to emails from community people that really want me to help them. And I find that to be so rewarding that these communities trust me to do right by them. So here's a community that we're getting ready to work with that's worried about a new natural gas electrical power plant that's going to be open, of course, on the black part of town. And there's also going to be an Amazon Web Services data center on the other part of town. So they're going to be sandwiched between these two things. And they want us to get out and do this work. And, thinking about this and thinking about good neighbor agreements, like when I work with the Fenway and their issues in Boston, one of the things that kept coming up was good neighbor agreements. So we're now working with communities, and we're working with Vermont Law and Graduate School to kind of come up with a template for good neighbor agreements. It's one thing to study the problem after it's happened, but it's another to empower communities to be able to voice their concerns before the construction happens. So that's kind of like infrastructure science. I know that's kind of like a meandering way. I know you're probably like, Erica, you're insane. You're unfocused. You are all over the place. Those things are true. But I feel like in the process, we've done meaningful work. But I also want to talk to you about backyard science. I don't know. I'm always amazed when I come uphill and I hear how quiet it is outside. Occasionally you'll get a leaf blower here and there and it's loud. But I live in Pawtucket and I live right next to I-95 and I don't have the same experience. But I think it's also important for us. Again, I live in Rhode Island. I live in Pawtucket, and it's important for me not to forget my backyard. So I'm just going to kind of go through briefly and just talk about backyard science. But the more important thing from this is to make sure that we can love our travels, but we should never forget where we live. And so, I like to also do work in Rhode Island. I'm just gonna kind of go through this to just kind of highlight the importance of doing work in our backyards. Nothing to see here, just going through. So in summary, we're experiencing a period of reckoning. I don't know if you guys realize what's happening with grant funding, but I don't think it's out of nowhere. I know I've talked to a lot of my colleagues and they're like, I can't believe this happened. Like, where did this come from? I can't believe this. But it didn't come from nowhere. It came from it's been a long time in the making. It's the Jackson Hart studies that don't stay around and provide needed infrastructure for the communities. So we're in a point, we're experiencing a period of reckoning. People are, can I curse? They're sick of our shit. And so we need to come to terms with that. And I think as public health researchers, instead of telling people what to do or telling people what's important to study, telling people what they should focus on, I think we need to take what I call a basket of goods approach. And I say that is an approach where I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to trust that you know what's best for you and your loved ones. But through my research, through the tools that are developed, through whatever I do, I want to make sure that I provide you with a basket of goods where if you reach into that basket of goods or not, you can choose you can create or you can pick optimal choices. So for me, I feel like my job as a public health researcher is to create an opportunity where people can pick from your basket of goods and they can choose, and every choice that they pick is optimal. And it's not necessarily us telling people what to do, but providing people with good choices. Because most of the time, people are crazy. If you provide people with good choices, they will make good choices. I also think that we need to work on problems that matter. Not matter to us, but matter to society. And it may not be what you necessarily want to work on, and it may not be even in your expertise. For example, as I showed with you earlier, noise pollution was number 12. I just put up my first noise pollution monitor a couple of months ago, and I've been in Mississippi for many years. But that may not be the case. But in the process of working on what matters, you'll put yourself in a position to where you'll be better able to serve your community. And you'll also learn a lot. I've learned so much about water quality. I've learned so much about soil quality, things I would have never, ever even thought about. But I'm also a student of life, and I appreciate that education. And I think that public health is not going to return to what it was previously. I don't know if that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. I don't know. Like I said, there's a part of me that wants it all to burn down to the ground. But I don't think it should return to what I don't think it should return to what it was before. A lot is being dismantled. A lot is being challenged. But I think this presents an opportunity for us to rebuild, but rebuild in an image that's better. And so I think that things like tenure, salary coverage, if I hear salary coverage one more time, I understand it. And firsts, the first Black woman to do this, the first Black woman, these are poor markers of good public health. I don't think they say much. They say much for the individual, but they don't say much for society. So I think that we need to solve problems and build infrastructure in the communities that we operate in. I am more happy about that little rinky-dink illegal dumping database. Trust me, it's not the best thing in the world, than I am about being the first person to do something or the second person to do something or getting tenure or getting a grant that covers 10% more of my salary. Those things just aren't important to me. What's important for me is to be able, for communities I work with, to be able to look back on the work that I've done and say that, hey, I can positively and tangibly identify some way that she made my life better. I think in economics, we could call that, there's a term called Pareto efficiency. It's like where we want to create we want to create an allocation of goods where we make everyone better off, but no one person worse off. So for me, that's kind of like the way I'm going to approach things. But I think that to answer the question, public health, have we lost our way? I think the answer is yes. But I think it's really easy for us to get out of our own way and create a new path forward. And I think that just involves us checking our ego, kind of checking and really thinking about what's important and really getting out there and doing things that matter and not matter to us, but matter to communities, whether it's Mississippi, whether it's Pawtucket, whether it's Central Falls, wherever. Creating infrastructure and solving problems in places outside of this Ivy League bubble. And on that note, I want to advertise our Environmental Explorer School. So if you know anybody between the ages of 12 and that's in middle school and you think they would like to enroll in our Environmental Explorer School, let me know. We have about 30 more seats available. So if you know anyone, let me know. And I would just like to thank you. This is not an exhaustive list, but I just want to thank all of you for listening to my rant. Again, this was more from self-reflections. Don't think that I'm talking at you. I'm in a room full of people who do these things much better than myself, Dr. Tovar, Sarah Bouchard. I think you guys do community engagement work way better than I do. But these are reflections from my experiences. I'm not saying that I'm doing things right. I'm definitely up for correction. But these are my thoughts, or as I say, my self-reflections. Thank you.
Question. Is this on?
No, it was switched.
Yeah, the engineer can do it. Oh, here we go. Ooh, turn it's light. Wow. Okay, so time for questions.
I don't think I'm pretty loud. I need it for recording.
We want it to be recorded.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can everyone hear me? Erica, thank you. I love this presentation and your courage and vulnerability, and just thank you and for the amazing work you're doing. And to many of us, including Sarah, we are trying to do more community engaged work here at the university, and there is, very excited that there's an agenda. There's a community engagement agenda that was put forward, the university.
Yes.
And I think we're really excited about that and really trying to figure out, okay, how can we move this forward? How can it be that the community can come to us and say, we have these questions, we have these issues, can you come and help us research? And so I guess to you, the question is, what opportunities do you see for Brown as an institution? And I know you alluded to some of them, but what are some of those opportunities and challenges that you foresee? And again, we're going to have lunch.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about this.
Your
a little
treat,
more.
of course, right?
Yeah.
Your treat. Okay.
But yeah, to talk a little bit about kind of as an institution, we have an agenda, but clearly, there's opportunities and challenges. What are some of those that you see?
Yep. So I think I'm gonna start with the challenges, just because I think that it's trust, and I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. So like in the abstract for this talk, I said that I went to a community in Alabama to put up an air noise pollution monitor, and they were like, oh, we did not think you were going to show up because it was raining that day. And, we were driving from Jackson to Meridian to Alabama. And so they kept calling us. And then when we actually showed up, they really didn't think we were going to show up. So I think that we're battling that optics of we're not going to show up. We're going to show up when we want you to get a vaccine. We're going to show up when you want us to come to when we want them to come to our community meetings, when we want to ask them questions about how we should be doing things better. But I don't think that they believe that we show up when it matters. So I think that it's going to take a while to battle those optics. But I think that I think the agenda is going to be anything that they say they want us to work on. Like, I don't have any insights into I've heard lots of problems like air pollution, Dr. Hastings. And I just think that we just need to hear what they need for us to address, and we just need to address it, and we're going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And then once we do that, we'll build trust for us, and then we'll also build insights into ourselves. We'll be able to kind of predict. So like in Mississippi, when I first started, nobody would even take a water testing kit, right? Even though there was something that they said that they wanted, because they just didn't trust me. Even though I was born and raised in Mississippi, I had a little accent and I acted a little different and I dressed a little funny. But through the process of addressing a series of, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be there, I think you build trust. And then when you build trust, people will give you insights. And when you get insights, then you'll be able to address the things that need to be addressed. But I think we have to take baby steps and just show up to, as they say, she's so desperate, she showed up to the opening of a letter. I think we just need to show up to the opening of a letter, and then and let them see that they can trust us and take it from there. But one of the good things about showing up is that you begin to get a sense of what's going on. I'm sure, Dr. Hastings, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but I'm sure you, by all of the air pollution stuff, I'm sure you now know hot spots, right? You know where to direct your resources because you're actively monitoring those things. So I think it's things like that. Just, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak for you.
Oh, hi. So my question is about public health education, and if reflecting on what you were taught and what you wish you were taught, and how we can do that better so that the public health practitioners who are coming out of our programs are doing public health that matters.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say something that's going to sound terrible, but I like the terrible education that I got, because I had to figure it out on my own, and figuring out on my own that College of Hard Knocks will get you better than anything. So I think probably the best way would be to just drop you off into the wilderness and have you survive. But I wouldn't do it any other way, because I think that theory and stuff has its place, but the best way to learn is just to get out there and do it. And any opportunities where students or faculty or whoever can get out there and just do it, I think that's the best. That's the best way. The best way is to challenge everything that you've learned in a very adversarial environment. For me, that's what I would think. I'm not trying to phone it in, but I wouldn't change anything about my education.
I wanted to throw a few adjectives back at you. You've been so dedicated, so purposeful, and so responsive in the work that you've done. And I think that's really, really important. And so while it sounds, you feel like it's all over the map, that part of that is the structures that have been put on us as academic scientists. And so for myself as a physical scientist, one of the things I thought that might be interesting to talk about in this crowd, you brought up the federal funding landscape. I find it really challenging to write grants and convince my scientific colleagues that the results and the outcomes aren't predictable, but they're going to be good.
Yes.
And so, like you said, like you would have easily, and maybe you did, write a grant, like I'm going to go study noise pollution in Jackson City without talking to anybody there.
Yes.
And then you showed up and was like, nope, we got to do all this other work first. And so something about that needs to penetrate into our funding structures. And I'm curious if you had thoughts on, what kinds of funding structures work best for you to be able to do this kind of responsive work and to be able to be nimble in that way.
Yeah. So I had a fantastic funder, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Can't say enough about them. Can't say enough positive stuff about them. So I just told them, I was like, hey, I got this grant to do this work, but we need to do water quality stuff first. And they were very nimble as well. They were like, okay, what do you need? We're not going to give you any more money, but you can use the money that you have to address this problem first. But you better do a good job, because if you don't do a good job, then it's going to be really terrible because you wasted our time and our money. But I also think seed funding, catalyst funding from IBIS has helped to kind of be able to pivot. The OVPR Seed Award has been very helpful. But I'm also one of those kind of people where I don't need money to do anything. I grew up extremely poor. Money is a luxury. I grew up my whole life doing everything with nothing. So for me, money is not going to be the determinant of whether or not I'm going to go into community and help. It makes it easier, but it's not going to be a deterrent. But I think if you have a funder that understands that, that's great. And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in this case was, and I wasn't paid to say that by them, by the way, but they were very responsive. But I found that the seed funding at Brown, I've talked to Dean Jha about some things, and he was like, sure, yeah, go ahead. So I think that's just been, I think the first thing that we have to do is just ask. You miss all the shots you don't take. So I just always ask, and if people say no, I'm like, okay, no is the beginning of a yes, but we'll get there eventually.
Dr. Walker, thank you very much for such a wonderful talk. I wanted to ask you a question about historical context. In your work in Boston, and especially in Dorchester regarding the noise issue, simultaneously, have you ever asked any people in the community along historical lines, has noise been an issue? Or have you ever looked at the Boston Globe or other newspapers that said, this is a particular concern for the community, either noise coming from a factory, noise because they're building an expressway, or noise coming from firecrackers or whatever?
Yes. So I think, not specifically, I haven't asked that question specifically, but through kind of observation, two things. Noise is one of those exposures that comes as a result of poor planning and practices. So typically the loudest parts of our city are the parts that are inundated with transportation activities or poor public safety, things like that. But those are planning issues. And so when you ask yourself who lives in those kind of communities, it tends to be Black and brown people. But I think ultimately noise stems from just poor policy. Oh, you were going to say something?
That makes sense to me, but I want to talk about the people in the community's perception of it. Growing up in Chicago, I grew up right by the stockyards. The smell was just horrible, but no one ever complained about the smell. Or I lived just maybe 30 blocks north of the steel mills. I can't remember anyone complaining about the noise emanating from the steel mills.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying contextually,
Yes.
in terms of how you define noise, might it vary depending upon people that are long-term residents?
Yes.
As opposed to maybe someone who just moved in Dorchester who's new and says, well, this is quite different based on me being at Brown University. Now I moved to Dorchester.
Yes.
And it's really loud.
Yes. So the definition of noise is unwanted sound, and unwanted is definitely it varies by individual and individual, community by community. But I think you raised two really good points. The first point is people living in noisy environments and not complaining about it. I think a lot of people, especially in my experiences working in Dorchester, also working in rural communities that are being now impacted by industrial activity, they just kind of feel like, well, no one's going to care if I say anything. If I complain, no one's going to do anything about it. I'm expecting this because of who I am and because of my identity. So I think a lot of people don't feel empowered to say anything, even though they're heavily impacted by it. And then also too, I think that we sort of, when we do our urban planning practices and policies, those are the people that we dump on because we know they don't have the power to say anything. And if they also know that they're not going to complain, that makes it ripe for infiltration. So I think it's people feel powerless to say anything, but we use that power to plan our cities, or that powerlessness to plan our cities. No, thank you so much for that question.
Hi, my name is Mindy Schneider. I'm an IBIS, and I want to thank you for this talk. It was really just fantastic, so thank you very much. The question that I have is, I watch you talk about all these amazing things that you've done, and I'm trying to understand how you do it all. And I mean that very literally in terms of how do you keep up with the publishing and also, be a person in community and being responsive. So that question, but then related, kind of how are you managing to work so interdisciplinarily and produce kind of educational materials, which I imagine need some sense of how do middle schoolers learn, what level do they learn, and pivoting to water. So if you could just share a bit about how you are navigating these different areas of thought and practice.
Yeah, great question. So this is a presentation. Of course, I'm going to put my best foot forward. But one of the things I will say, and this is one of the things that has really helped me in life, I believe that you should just do something. Like if you feel like something needs to be done, you should do it. And one of the most beautiful things about life is that it's probably cheaper and easier to just do it. And if you do it wrong, somebody will always tell you. People are so eager to tell you that you're wrong. And so I'm just like, I'm going to do it. And let me see if I can find it. I'm just going to do it. And if I'm wrong, somebody will tell me that I'm wrong. I wanted to show you a typo. I had created that activity book. And if you look at the front, you can look at the title. It's a activity book. So I printed 500 copies of these. So I make mistakes. I don't do everything well, and I don't do everything right. But I have a team, and I trust that when I do something wrong, somebody's going to yank my chain. And I know a lot of the stuff I do, I know I'm going to do it wrong, but I'm waiting for somebody to tell me how to do it right. And for me, that's the quickest, most efficient way to get things done. People, as I tell students, don't tell me you need a letter of recommendation. Send me a draft. So I find if you give people a draft of something, they'll edit it, they'll whip it into shape. So I rely a lot on that. So I never start out thinking that I'm going to do everything right. I'm fully aware that I'm going to make mistakes because I'm not a water quality expert. I never will be. But I trust the process. I'm going to step out there and I know someone's going to tell me I'm wrong. And because people want to, especially when you're at a place like Brown and you have a Harvard PhD, people want to prove you wrong. So I take that as a free and cheap education. Thank you very much. Can you correct that? And I'll keep it moving. So I think you should just start. And when you start, there will be a group of people that will kind of carry you along the way. And I don't think I do everything well. There's so many mistakes that I've made along the way, but I like that part of this. I like learning from my failures. I think that's so motivating.
So Erica, that was awesome. And I'm a massive Erica Walker fan. I mean, you know that. And I've proven that over the last few years, hopefully. But so let me ask you a question that may feel like a little bit of a pushback to your talk.
That's fine.
So we traditionally say that the mission of a university is we generate knowledge, we impart it to others through teaching, and then we translate it to the broader public. It's a three-part mission. Nowhere in that mission is we go into communities, we learn what their needs are, we build trust, we make things better. Now, I don't think there's anybody in this room who would deny that what you do and the way you've done it has been awesome. The question is that part of the mission of a university?
What are
And-
we in the school of? We're in the school of
Public health,
what did you say?
public health.
Public.
I love the fact that I'm getting an education in public health from one of my faculty.
We are in a school of public health. It is embedded in the name that we serve the public. We are public servants. That's how I view it. Like I said, you may not disagree with me. So I think we very much need to be in the community. But I get what you're coming from. I get it.
I had to put it on there.
So before I get beaten up by Christy, who has organized this event, there's a light collation in the back. So I'm going to take a few more questions and then kind of we'll work our way into the back. And I'm going to ask the last question. So that organizer's prerogative.
Thank you very much. I have a question about continuity. Of course, all this work that you've done is incredible. What happens tomorrow when maybe you're working with another community or you're stepping aside temporarily for some reason? Do you think that the person who you would pass the torch to is someone who grew up in Jackson as well? Is it a Harvard-trained PhD student? Is it a Ivy League faculty? Or is it the government or some other body that should have done that in the first place? Who comes after you?
Yep. I always plan my work around what happens when I leave. I don't ever, 10 years from now, I want to have my own ceramic studio selling pottery. That's my long-term goal. But I don't know if you missed it, and I don't know where, let me just kind of go back and find it. Sorry, guys, I'm admiring the slides. We work a lot with community college students. And so community college students statistically are the ones who are more likely to stay in the community and positively impact it. So I'm not just doing this work alone. I guess I should have clarified that. I work with a lot of students, and I like community college students because not only are they more trusted than myself, they're more likely to stay behind. And they're also much more connected to the community than I will ever be. So I don't ever write any of these grants or do any of this research thinking that I'm going to be doing it forever. I want an off-ramp. And I feel like empowering these community college students, these high school students, is the way to pass the torch. And as you can also see, these students like Jacqueline, like Michaela, like Lainey, they're carrying on the torch. I don't think I'm going to ever go back I'm not going to top that activity book, but now she has a trajectory that she can continue, and she can train her own people, and they can go. But this is not about me trying to be everything to everybody. I want to create infrastructure, but infrastructure is something that everybody can use. We all can go across this bridge. We can all use this road. So I believe in training the next generation to be there when I'm not going to be there. Because like I said, 10 years from now, I want to have my own pottery studio.
Hi, so this is kind of a follow-up to the question on noise and incoming residents versus longtime residents. And so you mentioned that noise is specifically sound that's irritating. And so I was wondering if in your research on noise, you came across residents who might have lived in the same community, but some residents perceived, I guess I'm particularly thinking about in gentrification. That's been a hot topic where neighborhoods where people see the sound as more of community, people playing music long into the night, celebrating with one another. Incoming residents come in, call the police, and there's that tension there, right? Yes. So I was wondering if you saw that in your research, and if you did, how that came up.
Yes. So one of the communities here, I know it's kind of hidden, but there's East Boston, there's Mission Hill here. So that was specifically the question that we dealt with in Mission Hill. So Mission Hill is a neighborhood in Boston that's right next to the Longwood Medical Area that has all of our level 1 or level 3, I don't remember which one, the trauma hospitals, all of the teaching hospitals for Harvard Medical School. And so they're also a neighborhood that is being rapidly gentrified. So gentrification changes the soundscape in two ways. So for example, previously these communities had triple deckers lots of triple deckers on the top of a hill. But as gentrification happened, people began to build new construction, and the new construction would be like at the level of these triple deckers, but where the community used to be able to like look out on their back porch and see the city, they're now looking at an HVAC system that's like blowing in their face. So it changes the structure, the actual physical structure of the community. And it also changes the way the noise moves through the community. So if you're adding up new impervious surfaces where sound can reflect off of it and bounce off of it and all kinds of things, it changes the way the sound moves through the community. But it also changes the acoustical expectations. Usually the people that move in, or the gentrifiers, quote unquote, are the ones that have more new or different expectations than the indigenous. And so there is a war between the two communities, right? So if I'm looking at you as you paid $35,000 for your house, I just moved into this neighborhood, I paid $500,000 for this house, I'm paying more property taxes than you, blah, blah, blah. You have a certain acoustical culture against the natives or the indigenous people, and there's wars to be fought. That experience working in Mission Hill was one of the reasons why I say as a researcher, I am not pro-quiet, I'm more pro-peace. Quiet was one of those things I saw people that had more power could be able to just literally shut people up. You can't play music at this time, even though it was an accepted practice. You can't grill on the weekends, or you can't have family reunions in the park. But pro-quiet means that I feel like I would be given power to people to just shut down things without conversation. But pro-peace means that both sides have to come to the table, give something and give up something. So that whole experience is the reason why when people talk to me about noise exposure, I'm like, I am completely anti-quiet, but definitely pro-peace. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that question.
Okay, so I'll close it out, I guess. Well, excuse me, I'm closing it out. I'm just imposing my will. So following up on Alan and Ashish's question, and I guess a general tenor in the room is what comes after. And a lot of these things, look, we know how to build bridges that don't fall down. There are building codes. There are all of these things. So there are people, and it's not necessarily us. I know it's not me, but it's not necessarily you. But are there people that can take this corpus of work and the way you've done it and build a structure that is persistent and, propagative, that can move to other communities? So, have you thought about that? And
sustainable.
You should be thinking about that, I think,
I want to own my own ceramic studio. 10 more years and I'm done. I think that's the big question. That's the big question. First of all, is what I'm saying correct? There are many things that I've looked back on, even this time last year, I was looking at my, my statements and my profile, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that and I changed it. So I don't know if what I'm doing is even right. I think good ideas in general tend to naturally propagate. I think they tend to naturally build itself up. And I think that they will withstand the test of time. So I don't even know if what I am saying to you today is the accurate thing to say. Who knows? If time will only tell if the way I'm describing the way we should be doing research is correct. But if it's correct, then I think it'll naturally propagate. But I think that's the big question that needs to be addressed. But 10 years and I'm done. I want a ceramic shop so bad.
All right, look, thank you so very much, Erica.
you.
That was really wonderful.
Thank you. It's nice to meet everybody.